So I watched It Ends With Us and I have a few things to say to Blake Lively. Wow, this movie was so depressing. I can't believe I watched that. But I'm glad to hear that some people took some really positive things away from it, and it even encouraged them to leave their own dangerous or unhealthy relationships and was like the final push they needed. I love hearing that because that's why the movie was originally meant to be made. And this movie was actually quite good. It was way better than I was expecting. It was absolutely fine. Like, I thought it would be bad and it was quite good. My problem with It Ends With Us is not really with the movie itself, but it's with the marketing of the movie. So let's get into the major problem with It Ends With Us. The first problem was basing it off a Colleen Hoover novel, because I have a major problem with Colleen Hoover and her writing. Some of it is just downright gross and creepy. Her books became famous actually a while after their release through Book Talk. You cannot underestimate the power of Book Talk. Everyone was talking about it, and so the novels started to top the charts and become bestsellers. And I will always be annoyed about this because I think there's better novels out there and better shows too that talk about domestic violence. I just don't really like her work, sorry not sorry, but I know many people really resonated with it, and that's great to hear. So this movie is about a girl called Lily Bloom, and the book's the same concept, and she's still thinking sometimes about her childhood / teenage love, Atlas, but she's now older and she's in this new relationship with this guy called Ryle, who seems really great and she's really happy at first, and then suddenly it all goes downhill. This movie really needed some kind of warning, content warning at the beginning, because a lot of people who know nothing about the original book may not have known that this is primarily a story about domestic violence, and they may have gotten a real shock if they weren't expecting that coming into the movie and being like, oh my gosh, like what is this? If you were not prepared or you didn't have any context. I've heard stories about people who got a really nasty shock because it was way more than they were prepared for, and they were expecting a cute, fluffy, fun rom-com for the summer and not something disturbing. So I was really disappointed with how this movie was promoted, because it was kind of used as like this launching pad for Blake Lively to talk about her hair care line and her cool floral dresses she was wearing to the premieres, and talking about her new alcohol line, Betty Booze or whatever it's called. And honestly, if you just looked at the way she promoted it and also what she talked about in interviews leading up to it, calling it a great, beautiful summer movie, you would think that it was just like a really fun, light, maybe rom-com.
They're really going to want to talk to you. This movie is going to affect people and they're going to want to tell you about their lives. So if someone understands the themes of this movie, comes across you in public, and they want to really talk to you, what's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about this? How would you recommend they go about it?
Like asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share? Or I could just location share you, and then we could, I'm just curious about
social security number.
And this rubbed many, many people the wrong way, not just me. And the backstage drama and Blake Lively herself has been talked about almost more than the release of the movie itself. And that's really disappointing, because this should just be an opportunity to talk about the key topic and the themes and raise awareness about domestic violence. And instead, it's become this bizarre, like, fight and discussion around celebrities and how tone deaf and out of touch they are with the real world. There have been a lot of rumors of Justin Baldoni, the director, and Blake Lively fighting for creative control. Who knows if it's all a PR stunt or what, but I seriously doubt it, because they're never really together or including each other, talking about each other in interviews. And if someone is praising the other, it's always Justin saying something polite about Blake Lively, but she's never talking about him, so you would almost think it was her movie, the way that she discusses it in interviews, for example. And it's very odd though, because this was his baby, he had the rights to this movie, he'd been working on it for a long time, and yet Blake barely like mentions him when people ask her about it, and also he's like her main co-star. It's even weirder too when she's talking about her and her husband and Colleen Hoover the whole time and acting as if Justin isn't there. Who knows really what's going on? I'm not interested in speculating, like this isn't a drama channel, but I will say that Justin Baldoni has got a podcast and done TED Talks and all sorts of things about toxic masculinity and being a better man and trying to be a feminist man, and he seems very passionate about the cause, and his history shows that, whereas Blake Lively not so much, and he seems to care quite deeply about the meaning of this film and why it was made in the first place, which is actually really sweet and surprising considering he's playing like the bad guy in the movie. But he also seems to really have an understanding of how charming the abuser can be at first and how they can lure you in and not seem like necessarily mean or bad at first. So he seems to have really studied the character and the kind of cycle of abuse that people can fall into where they're charmed by someone. So I feel like he really cared about this role and he nailed it. Whereas Blake, I can't say that I feel like she did, and also she looks way too old for this role. I'm sorry, like considering how old the character's meant to be, I just think they should have picked a different actress. There were many other options. But I haven't seen the public turn as quickly against someone in such a short space of time as they have with Blake Lively. It's actually quite crazy considering how positive her PR and her reputation has been thus far. I'm actually really shocked. And I'm aware that often in the media there are cycles where if one woman has too many press releases, too many big covers and magazine shoots coming up, she's talked about way too much in the media, she's too successful at the time, then people don't like it and the media will suddenly decide to try and bring her down and pit against that woman. And it's happened time and time again with Anne Hathaway, with Jennifer Lawrence. You can just see it. They just find an opportunity to start hating on one specific woman, Katherine Heigl, for example, and tear her down. But so I know some people were saying, oh, that's what's happening with Blake Lively, is everyone's just finding like an opportunity to tear down like a beautiful, successful woman, and they were like waiting for the moment to jump in it. But I really disagree with that. I think that many people who are survivors of domestic violence have just not felt heard through the way that she's kind of marketed this project, and they felt very insulted by it, and that's why they're so annoyed. I don't blame them. Like, I can't see, I mean, she's trying to fix it now, obviously, but I can't see any interview further back, and I was scrolling, okay, where Blake Lively really seemed to be taking it seriously, and she was like, yeah, guys, this is going to be some pretty heavy stuff, you know, I did some method acting, I went to women's shelters, I talked to survivors, I talked to my friends who've been in toxic relationships, you know, I did this research, I really, you know, tried to embody the character. Like, I was looking for even if she'd never experienced anything like that herself, I was looking for signs that she was really trying to, like, you know, work with people who'd been through something similar. And instead, she's just talking about it like she wants it to be a fun romance. But if you wanted it to be a fun romance, then you shouldn't have agreed to work in this movie, because it is a serious kind of movie. It's not something fun and fluffy. But the way that she talks about it is just so, like, funsy and cutesy. It's like two very conflicted, mixed marketing and messaging. Like, Justin's there talking about how heavy it was playing the character, and then Blake's on the other side being like, oh, wear your florals to the movie, like, you're gonna love it, oh, it was like so much fun and I got to wear this piece of clothing, and it's very bizarre. And there is a scene which is a near rape scene. Like, it was very, very hard to watch, and she's there asked in an interview about what the hardest scene was to film, and I immediately thought, okay, she's going to talk about that scene, because that, like, scene really stayed in my mind. And she was like, oh, you know, I'd say, like, honestly, and she just goes on this weird word vomity ramble, and you realize that she's actually avoiding the question. And that happens multiple times when she's asked about this movie, where she goes down memory lane, she starts a little ramble, and you realize that nothing she said actually made sense. Like, she uses some really big words, like some of the words, I can't even remember what they were, but like the biggest, most fancy vocabulary words she can think of. She's like, it's like an amygdalation of different characters. And honestly, like, I don't know if she actually knows who Lily Bloom is herself, because when someone asks her about Lily, for example, she's like, oh yeah, Lily's full of contradictions. I wanted to show that, you know, she's light and she's dark and she's masculine and she's feminine, and it's so weird watching her talk about the character. I've never seen anything like it. It's like she has no idea, like, who she's actually talking about. And a lot of people were annoyed because she says that abuse is something that doesn't define you, and that she wanted this movie to show that you're so much more than your abuse. There's nothing a man can do to you that will define you. And she's again trying so hard to just put this really positive, smiley spin on it rather than taking it seriously. And actually a lot of people found that comment very, very like dismissive and invalidating as opposed to like empowering. It's bizarre. It's one of the most tone deaf things I've seen in a while, and it makes me seriously question, like, has she actually had any PR or media training in her life? Like, I've never seen someone botch interviews and be so insensitive so much without, like, seeming like she hasn't had any preparation or training. It's crazy. Like, someone in an interview was asking her how she'd like prepare if people who'd seen the movie and survivors wanted to come and talk to her and find her, seek her out and tell her their stories. And, you know, she could have said, sorry, I'm not a trained therapist, so I can't, you know, help everyone, but, you know, I would recommend they call a hotline or they seek help and blah, blah. Like, just answer the question, first of all. But she's just sat like all curled up on the couch like it's a movie night. And then she's like, oh, should I give them my address? Should I give them my location drop? And it's just so weird. She's like annoyed at the question. Like, and I could go on. That's like only the tip of the iceberg. Rather than talking about the costume designer, she's talking about how she's wearing her own clothes in the movie or Gigi Hadid's clothes. And it's so weird because obviously normally there's a costume designer, so it doesn't really make much sense. But also the clothes that she wears in the movie are horrifyingly bad, like shockingly bad. So it's odd that she thinks it's like a brag to say that she put so much into the costumes when they're the worst I've seen in any movie in potentially years. And it's funny because of people's, I guess, parasocial relationships. They get very attached to someone like Blake Lively because of maybe her very prominent role in Gossip Girl, maybe her very much power couple vibe relationship with her husband Ryan Reynolds, and just her history. Like, I saw her in The Age of Adeline, for example, and I thought she was great in that movie and I really liked her. Or they just know her as a fashion icon most commonly. And so because they get attached to her for these various reasons or what she represents to them, they then struggle to kind of hold her accountable. But, you know, she could be all those things, and she could also be someone who doesn't really understand domestic violence and is very out of touch and was not the right person to be cast for this role or to be a producer in this role. And it's annoying because I watched the movie, right? And this was just strictly going to be a movie review. But honestly, the movie itself was good. I liked it. And I wasn't really seeing like any massive glaring issues aside from a few things I'll talk about in a minute. But overall, it was like better than it could have been, for sure, considering it was like based on a Colleen Hoover thing. So I was actually quite happy with the result, and I feel like Justin Baldoni was the reason I watched because he just nailed his character. Like, every scene, he did such a good job. But it's funny then because I came away from it and I took a step back and I was like, okay, what do I really want to say here? And I realized that my real problem is with the way that this movie was promoted and marketed. Blake basically admitted that her husband, Ryan, rewrote a part of the rooftop scene. First of all, no idea why, because he wasn't a part of this movie. He wasn't even an actor in it. So I don't know, like, I don't know. Maybe he was trying to be a supportive husband, but there's writers that are meant to do that. I have no clue how that happened. But what also pissed a lot of people off, and was again just a massive mistake, is she basically was saying that happened during the writer's strike when people looked at the timeline of it. And obviously the whole point is that you're not meant to write or work on anything during a writer's strike. Like, that's why it's called a strike. Like, you're not meant to touch anything out of respect. And so many people read the book, and I wish I had too, because I feel like I would be much better informed. But many people who read the book were saying they were really disappointed actually with the rooftop scene and how it was in the movie compared to how it was in the book, or they felt like the book was just better and kind of included more details and the movie missed out a lot. But to be honest, when I look at the movie as a whole, I did like it, but the rooftop scene really brought down the quality of the movie because it was right near the beginning. And it was really like standing out like a sore thumb because it was such a bizarre scene, and you could really tell, it was actually very strange, you could really tell that that was the scene that Ryan worked on, because it feels like out of place compared to everything else. Like just the fact that Blake Lively's character, Lily Bloom, by the way, she's called Lily Bloom, I forgot to say, and she's a florist. Lily Blossom Bloom. And are you kidding me? I want to like, okay. Anyway, Lily Blossom Bloom, which is such a joke, honestly. She meets this guy, Ryle, for the first time on this rooftop, which isn't even her apartment building. She's just there to kind of relax. And she's not at all frightened by the fact that he's literally wanting to kiss her after like maybe 10 minutes of talking. He's like, I want to have sex with you. And she's like, oh, like, do you say that to all the girls? Does it work? He's like, yeah, normally. What? I would be scared. Like, he's just so intense the way he's like, I want to have sex with you. Like, it's really awkward. And he's like kind of trying to like kiss her, and like, I don't know, I would just feel so unsafe if I was alone on a rooftop in the evening in an apartment block I don't actually live in, and no one knows I'm up there with this guy I've just met. Like, it's not safe. But also when she first meets him, he's like kicking a chair or throwing something out of anger. She kind of hears a loud boom sound, and she's not super alarmed by that. But if that was me, I'd be like, I'd be way more scared. So also a red flag that is just rubs me the wrong way somehow, because it was so obvious. And also the script is weird. Like, they're saying weird phrases like please with a cherry on top, and she's like, I'm the kind of girl you bring home to mama, and it's very like jarring. It doesn't really go. And another thing that really made it feel like a piece of poorly written fan fiction, mind you, like maybe that a 12-year-old wrote, is that when she sees him and she hears him for the first time, she doesn't seem like that alarmed. She kind of talks to him, asks him a question, and it took me maybe 2 minutes to realize that this was their first time meeting, because they were speaking with a familiarity that made me think they were already dating or like in a relationship. It was just extremely bizarre, and her like laughing and calling him, saying that his job surprised her because she thought he'd be like a tech boy. Like, it was just very odd. And people also didn't appreciate Blake mentioning her husband, because in their minds he wasn't like a part of the movie. They also didn't like her promoting her new alcohol line, because obviously 50% if not more of domestic violence cases are actually linked to alcohol, and so it's very tone deaf to at the premiere or at events be mentioning your alcohol or having it there and nicknaming one of the drinks after Ryle the abuser. It just shows a complete lack of care and respect. I think 2024 seems to be a new age where the status of celebrity is no longer what it was, and we're sick of pedestalizing and idolizing these strangers who don't care about you and don't care about the people who made them famous in the first place. So with that out of the way, what did I think of the actual movie? Wasn't bad at all. I thought they did a good job of showing how this person that you start dating can be abusive later on, but at first seems so sweet and kind of fun and just sweep you up in the fantasy, and not be showing necessarily like aggressive qualities, or if they do, it's like not very obvious if you're just not seeing it properly. And then how when they start getting like jealous or nasty, you don't want to see it because it's so hurtful. It's like this slow descent into abuse, and so maybe you're kind of aware it's happening, but you don't want to see it, and you're kind of like, but it's almost the confirmation bias. You're like, oh, but the first few dates, they were so sweet, they were so kind, like, I just know they're a good person, like they wouldn't treat me like that. And so it's really hard to then come to terms with the fact that you're not being treated well and you're being hurt. And the movie definitely did a good job at showing them initially starting to date and go out and just being really excited about the relationship, and they didn't jump too quickly into trying to like make him a bad guy, which I liked. They showed what Lily Bloom enjoyed about the relationship with Ryle. Of course, there were some silly things, like I thought it was a bit dumb how they went to the sister's birthday party together and then they left early, and then Ryle was just like, I'm going to bed, and she was like, yeah, okay, me too. And then he like undressed her and put her in pajamas. They just went to bed. Like, it was so weird. Like, I was like, does the sister know they've left? They've only been at the party for like 20-30 minutes. Like, it was very strange. And just the way he was so abrupt, he was just like, I'm going to bed. Like, I don't know, I was just like, oh, okay. Also, I hate the soundtrack in this movie. Taylor Swift should not have been there at all. It's so cringe. And Blake's hair is so fried. Like, it distracted me every scene. She's meant to be promoting a hair care line, and I've never seen someone with more damaged hair and split ends. And like, it looks, is it a wig? Also, like, she's always biting her lip like every 2 seconds, and it's really annoying. Like, at first I honestly thought it was really adorable, and then like by halfway through the movie I was like, okay, we need some other mannerisms. Atlas was okay. I know I'm meant to be obsessed with him, but I really don't feel like I know anything about him aside from the fact that he's a really nice guy and a bit overprotective and entitled of Lily, considering they haven't seen each other in years, but whatever, we'll just look past that. He's nice. He definitely has been through a lot in his life, but all I really know is that they bond over their shared trauma, and he's there to protect her when she needs something. He's there for her to call him. He doesn't have a girlfriend because he's almost like kind of maybe waiting for her. And he's good at cooking. I don't know, he just, something about him as a character made me not care about him because he seemed so like almost like this dream fantasy man, like the rags to riches fairy tale dream, but then not really based in me like understanding who this man is. Also, Lily was low-key toxic in this movie. Like, I hate to say it because she's obviously a victim and what happened to her was awful, but she liked Atlas. She still felt like she loved him even though it was a relationship so long ago. I don't get it. She's moved on. I don't know what more Raoul could have possibly done at the beginning to make her like him. And if you really felt like you were still having such strong feelings for Atlas that could come back so easily, why did you even agree to marry Raoul or get engaged? Like, I don't understand it. I feel like that's such bad behavior. It doesn't sit right with me. And the fact that, for instance, Atlas gave her his phone number and she kept it in her phone. Why? Why would you keep it? Like, you could have, I don't know, just something about it just didn't feel right to me. And the fact that whenever Ryle did ask her about it, she would just be like, oh, I love you. He'd be like, do you love Atlas? And she'd be like, oh, I love you. And she wouldn't like answer the question, or she kind of was like, yeah, maybe I do still care about Atlas. Like, that's such a gut punch. Imagine being the guy she's currently with now, and then she's kind of thinking back to some guy she dated and really loved in high school. Like, it just, the lying was what really didn't sit right with me. The kind of dishonesty and lack of honest communication. Like, it was just a bit, I wasn't a fan. There were some other things that were good, like for example the theme of denial and her not wanting to admit how badly Ryle was treating her, and the fact that she did know that, for instance, he had pushed her down the stairs, but she kind of blocked it out and like couldn't remember properly because she even said as much, that she's an unreliable narrator. I love that. Like, the movie's trying to tell you that her perspective can't be trusted because she's going to try and twist it in her head to defend him. That was really good. But I really didn't like the scene at the end in the hospital where she asks Ryle to divorce. The movie does not at all highlight that the most dangerous part of a domestic violence relationship is when you leave. Leaving is the most dangerous part. That's when there's the highest chance of you being killed or something very bad happening to you because the abuser's angry that you left. And that's the ultimate time to turn your location sharing off, to protect yourself, to not go back to them and see them when they're angry, to make sure they can't find you. Like, that is the most important thing. And the movie, my biggest problem with this movie is it made it seem like it's so easy for you to just leave. Like, she was just kind of like, I just want to leave. So she just kind of disappeared. Then she has a baby and he's there in the hospital room with her holding the baby, which she doesn't seem to like be scared of or have any issue with. And then she says to his face, I want a divorce, kind of smiling in his face saying, I want a divorce, while he's holding her newborn baby. Like, I'm just not sure if someone would do that, and especially because you'd be scared that this person could maybe flip at any second or be very erratic and emotional and burst to anger. She was just, also the way that she said it, like they were just talking about random stuff and then he was saying he liked her and missed her and she was like, I want a divorce. Like, it was very weirdly done, and actually everyone in the cinema just started laughing because it was kind of ridiculous. There's also a cameo from Colleen Hoover, which no one wanted. And I don't care if people say this is a romance. It isn't at all to me. It's primarily a dark movie and should have really been marketed as such. You need to be very clear what kind of a movie it is that you're showing, because a big percentage of people in the movie theater will either have seen a friend go through domestic violence or will be a victim themselves, and it could be very traumatic for people to relive that. And you can even see in the movie promo posters the wild difference in presentation. Blake's just as flowery and looks like a summer romance, and Justin's looks like maybe a psychological thriller. Also, Atlas, I don't know what it is about the actor or the casting, but I really liked the young version of Atlas that they cast. I thought he really worked in the role, but then the one I didn't like so much was actually the older version of Atlas. I just feel like he didn't work so well in the role. And also he has this really famous line where he says, if you ever get like the chance to fall in love again one day, fall in love with me, or something like that. I know a lot of people really love that line. And by the way, I think it's overhyped. I don't think it's that amazing a line personally, but people love that line. And when the actor said it, he rushed it, like he kind of mumbled it, and I feel like he really botched that. Like they should have done a retake, because it's a very like special line to have in the movie that you could really like savor and make this big moment, and they kind of fumbled it. But let me know what you thought of it in the comments if you went to see it, and I'll see you guys for the next one.